You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. And look, I've said this a million times. You've heard me say this before. If you need leads online for your real estate investing business, that is what we do over at AdWordsNerds.com. You can jump on a call with someone from our team, and they will help you put together a marketing strategy for your market. Okay, so now, this week, I've got a really fun interview this week, a little bit different from what we usually talk about. So I am talking to Edie Weintraub from TerraAlma.com. That's two R's in there. So Terra, Alma.com. And we do get, in the interview, we do talk about where that name comes from. But Edie is such a fun and fascinating interview. You know, Terra Alma is a woman-owned boutique real estate advisory that is building community through thoughtful connectivity of local, emerging, and inspiring brands. We talk about all sorts of things, from how real estate investors can help to drive the development of walkable communities where they live. We talk about upcoming trends in the commercial and retail and restaurant space. We talk about Edie's favorite things about Atlanta, her sort of home market, and we talk about the best meals Edie has had in the last year. She is a diehard foodie. You are not going to want to miss this one. So without any further ado, let's get into my interview with Edie Weintraub. What's up, everybody? This is Daniel Barrett from AdWords Nerds, and I am here with Edie Weintraub from TerraAlma.com. Edie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So Terra Alma. So this is Terra. Alma.
Yes.
This is like Earth Alma. So I want to ask where the name came from, and then we can dig a little bit into who you are and what you do within the real estate space. But I've got to ask about this name because I will say, I've had a lot of investors, a lot of real estate professionals on the show. Might be the coolest business name. Might be. It's up there. I think it's still easily top 5. So where did the name come from?
Great question. Thank you for asking. It was something I toyed with for quite a while. I was trying to understand, where does one name a company, right? It's kind of like those big questions, like when you name your children. I mean, are you confident? Are you happy? Oftentimes we lean on, our ancestors to inspire us. So I knew that I did not want a company named after me. If you look across the commercial real estate board, you see that the majority of companies are named after owners and,
Right.
Individuals. And I wanted something that could live beyond me, is my hope. And I also wanted it to be 10 characters or less, because inevitably people are going to have long last names, i.e. me. And I didn't want the end of the website to be too long. So I wanted to make it 10 characters or less. And so I dove deep into trying to figure out what would inspire not only my team, but also our clients to work with us. And I want it to be something that resonated with how we like to do business. So Terra is dirt in Italian, or ground or grounded, and Alma is Spanish for soul. So feel like we're working in the dirt, we're working in real estate, and then everything that we do, we're putting a piece of our soul into it. So we often find ourselves as more consultants rather than simply real estate brokers. So we wouldn't take on a client that we don't have absolute confidence that we're going to be successful for them.
I'm so glad that I asked that question, because I was like, it's sort of like a shot in the dark. I didn't know the answer, right? So I was like, oh, maybe we're going to be like, oh, that's my middle name or something. You know what I mean? But I love the idea of wanting it to live beyond you, right? And sort of creating a business that even in a broader way, right, isn't solely focused on the power personality of you, right, as the founder or as the sort of core mover. So let's talk about what you do at Terra Alma today, because it's a really interesting business model that I think is really cool. So walk people through what the business is all about.
Absolutely. So I've been in the commercial real estate space for about 20 years and have been with some pretty big name companies when I first started. One was specifically retail only. The other one was a global real estate firm. And so as I crafted what we wanted to do differently at Terra Alma, we stayed in the path of solely retail. Yeah, we'll pick up a listing that's a former restaurant here and there, even though it appears to be land. It's structured as a restaurant. But we've got two different paths that we work in. One, we've got our tenant rep group, and that team works with restaurateurs, entertainment facilities, working on behalf of the tenants and helping them to strategize a market entry, understanding how many locations we could possibly open, and then working backwards strategically in shipping off one at a time. So that way we've got one rock star and then come back in and fill in with the second location. And that's through mapping, data, analytics. I mean, we do a huge deep dive into our client's business to make sure that we understand who they are and that we are finding sites in the Southeast for them to expand and be successful. The other side of our business is our team consults with developers in the real estate space. So folks that are doing urban developments, downtown Main Street. We've got a lot of rail lines in Atlanta, and you're seeing those communities reimagined and come back to life. Maybe not so much with the booker, the shoe cobbler, the library, the butcher, the cheesemonger, but restaurants nonetheless. And then adaptive reuse. So when we consult with a developer, we're helping them to strategize the retail and restaurant space, because what we find, especially because we're continuing to run out of housing. So as we build more housing, local municipalities are pushing for developers to add retail restaurants at the base of their building. So that way it serves the community above. So we're consulting early on with those developers to make sure that they're designing the spaces that can house and has the infrastructure for those restaurants, but then also thinking through in advance as we come in as a new development in that market. We're very attentive to be that owner's advocate in speaking with the community to make sure that they don't feel as though there's a big bad developer coming in and displacing people. We really want to cultivate the energy and community that's already there. So we do a big deep dive with ownership well in anticipation of any shovels going in the ground.
Yeah, I think one of the things that made me really excited to sort of have this conversation is we share a real interest in sort of finding these kind of unique and emerging areas in local communities and sort of seeing what happens there. So there's so much I want to get to. Before we dive into that part of your life, I actually want to go back a little bit and talk about your background. It's my understanding that you actually started by getting a degree in biology. Is that the case?
Yes, I mean, it's important to study people and science. No, I actually thought I worked for my dentist all throughout high school and even for an orthodontist and all throughout college. It's a great way to pay for education. But I realized very quickly that when I was about to apply to dental school, that it really wasn't so much that I wanted to be a dentist. I just happened to like science. And, actually, as I got my bio degree, I fought in school to say, hey, dentists don't know marketing. They don't know business. So I was able to add a couple of those classes, management, to my studies. But I quickly realized I didn't want to be a dentist. I like people too much. I like talking to them too much, that being a dentist made me feel like I couldn't be as social as I would have liked. So at that point, I kind of sat back and reflected and said, okay, I like people. I like being out and about. I'm very independent. What should I do? So I thought about getting my law degree. And before I did that, before I spent the time, the money, the energy going to law school, I got my paralegal certification and had a little bit of exposure to trademarks, patents, copyrights, some really, really smart people, and realized it was all paperwork and I missed people. And I switched over into medical malpractice and family law, where I found that people are just mean and I like happy people.
Yeah, not the cheeriest of industries would be my take on it.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. So my father has always been in land assemblage and development himself, specifically in residential. And he saw that, I was still kind of searching. So he said, Edie, I know that you've kind of made this path. You've done a great job. I'm really proud of you, but I really think that you should come work with me and see what this real estate space is all about. So I got my license. I did a part-time, then full-time. and quickly realized that while I loved real estate, I loved the independence. I have a very strong work ethic, having grown up in New Jersey. And I just did not like the emotional part of residential real estate. What the wife wants, what the husband wants, what they can afford, what's on the market, trying to put all those pieces together with the emotion just was, I couldn't solve all those problems at once. So I stalked a company for about a year and a half, had a warm introduction to them, saw their signs everywhere. At the time, before they rebranded, it was pink, yellow, and orange. And I said, well, that's kind of like female friendly. I'm going to give them a call. And again, had a connection there. And I stalked them for about a year and a half, knocked on their door, emails, phone calls. Let me take you out for coffee. I want to work here. And so finally they said, okay, Edie, we get it. You're tenacious. You don't give up. We need to bring you in and, teach you the business. So I was there, became a partner for 11 years, and now I've got my own company. So it's been a fun ride.
I find that story so awesome because, it strikes me, right? Like it's the sort of one of the last big myths of our culture is that as a kid, you decide what you want to be when you grow up and then you go do that thing, right? It's like, that's really like your story, I think, is most people's stories where you bounce from thing to thing. Now, I'm really curious, and I always ask this, right? Because I'm really fascinated by people who are today doing something that was very different from what they went to school for. And one of the questions I always have about that is there anything that you took into your current life from your studies of biology? Or like you said, you were a kid that you really like science, right? Do you find like that there's mental models or even an approach to things that you carry over from one thing to the other? Are there corollaries? Are there connections? What do you think?
That's a great question. I think innately, I'm just extremely curious. I'm the kid that had, 5 different groups of friends, and to not make any of them feel as a high schooler, and to not make any of them feel like I was spending more time with than that group than the other, I would go to the library for lunch and I would get an assignment and I'd be like, I'm jumping in right now. I want to get this done because if I change my mind and I want to go in a different direction, I want to make sure I've got that time. So, right. Kind of leaning back on biology, I took, 2 semesters of Mandarin. I took Asian philosophy. I took, psychology, classes that didn't necessarily need to for a biology degree, but, I just really love school. I made it through COVID by reading over 40 books in 2020 and in 2021. So I'm just like to soak up the knowledge. So I think with that, and just being a super curious individual and having folks jump in my car, and all that we might have in common from the very beginning is that they're new clients and they've got a restaurant and they want to expand. But what I really love is that oftentimes it turns into a therapy chair, and I'm learning so much about everyone that's in my car that's really the excitement for me is, yeah, of course I want to get them open and be in a beautiful space and come dine at the restaurant. But I'm so enamored like you with people's stories.
Yeah. Yeah. It strikes me that, and I can't remember exactly where I learned this, right? But there's like 2 types of learning, right? Particularly among people who are really successful, right? You have I learning, which goes deep into a particular field, right? You have this deep knowledge of the real estate world. You've been doing it forever. But there's also T learning, which is sort of across the top, right? You have a little bit of knowledge from all these different fields. And it strikes me that like, that's a very common pattern among successful people, that they connect all these different ideas from different worlds. And it just strikes me that it's kind of uniquely situated to what you do today, because one of the strengths, or I think one of the things that really differentiates you and differentiates Terra Alma from a lot of the different sort of companies in your field is that you seem to really have your finger on the pulse of emerging brands, right? Sort of this sense of like what makes this kind of emerging sort of ideal of like a walkable community. Like you said, like a building that's serving the people at the top by having something at the bottom. You really seem to have connected to something there. So can you tell me, and I'll preface this with a story, right? One of my, somebody that works with me, this guy, Jason, who's sort of a critical part of my team and has been for a long time. We were talking about Halloween and he was saying, oh, we did a trunk or treat, right? So they did the whole trunk or treat thing, which is, everybody brings their cars to a parking lot. You decorate your trunks or the back of your cars or whatever. And then the kids walk around, they basically trick or treat in the parking lot of people's cars, right? And that's a trunk or treat. And I was telling that story to somebody else and they said, that's because we've all just gotten used to in America not having walkable community, right? Like you just can't walk around where you live, and we all just accept that. So I'm fascinated by this idea of walkable communities, and I know that's something that you care about, but I don't really know a lot about the history of that idea or whether we're getting more of those or less of those. Can you talk a little bit about that idea of the walkable community and how that connects to the work that you do?
Absolutely. I'm passionate about creating more 15-minute cities. So 15-minute city, I can't remember exactly who coined the term, but I'll liken it back to Jane Jacobs, who fought off, Mr. Moses in New York City and putting all these highways through Manhattan. And, she just saw gathering spaces that happened organically and said, you can't break this up because you're killing the fabric of our community. So, our ethos is, and to, the name too, Terra Alma, bringing people together, gathering spaces and creating walkable communities. I feel post-COVID, everybody had a chance to not have to travel and not be in their cars, and hopefully had an opportunity to get to know their neighbors and their community, and maybe, be outside and walk a little bit more. So I feel that it's unfortunate that we didn't take early inspiration from our European, counterparts and create denser cities because, we invented the car in the US. So the world in the US, the communities were built for cars. There is a very strong conversation happening in the Southeast about mass transit and bike lanes and trying to create those walkable communities, because I feel more and more people don't want to spend time in their car driving to work, driving to the grocery store. I mean, it's a better quality of life, and you can get out and walk, bike, whether that's an electric bike or regular bike, and you're exercising, whatever it is, just to get you to kind of recenter in your community. So my partner and I actually just recently attended a conference that Jim Hyde out of California put together for small developers. And these are folks who, don't have, big, deep pockets. They're putting together projects that they are truly passionate about. And so to be in a room full of them, of 70 people last week, we toured downtown Nashville and looked at a couple of projects that are very much in line with this small development. And everyone also had a chance to talk about what they were doing. And so it was a very energizing experience. And so much so, my partner and I drove back the 4 hours from Nashville, and we looked at each other and we said, yeah, we need to do this. And it's something we've been talking about for a while, but I think, jumping in is something that we just need to go for. So we've cultivated relationships with a lot of folks in economic development in these more tertiary markets of Atlanta and Charlotte, that there might be opportunity for us to take down 1 or 2 or 3 buildings and renovate them, maybe put some apartments upstairs or offices, and then put restaurants that truly speak to the community. There might be a sous chef that's working for someone else that has always dreamed of having their own space, and to give them the platform to do that puts smiles on our faces.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
So if you were going to sit down with a real estate investor that is maybe interested in encouraging the sort of creation of this kind of community, right? Because it's an interesting problem, right? Like there are a lot of sort of top-down, artificially designed communities that people set up that don't go anywhere because they don't actually serve the people that are supposed to do it, right? Like it's sort of like too planned. And then on the flip side, if you have no planning at all, right, it's very hard to predict where things are going to go. So if you're going to sit down with a real estate investor that's interested in encouraging this kind of community building or this kind of development, where would you suggest that they start? Is there like a particular place that they look in terms of where they want to invest? Is a certain type of investment? Like what advice would you give to them if they'd like to be a part of this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question too, because I think more and more, I think we're all looking for personal satisfaction. And I think to come in and, plunk down a grocery anchored center with the normal shop space that goes next to it, that's got a massive sea of parking, that's not what we need in an in-town environment. I think the challenging part is making those connections with the folks at the local community and those things take time. And so we got one now actually where we just met the owner developer, and, their story to us was, we need your help because all of these business owners and restaurateurs that we need to leverage your relationships to come in here to say, hey guys, we want to hear you with the community. What do you want? What do you as business owners want? What are you missing? I mean, you want to keep that authenticity of that community consistent. You don't want to come in and shake things up and put a Chipotle where no national brands exist. And so there's that balance. And I think it takes, the right owners to realize, I've got to build my team. I've got to do this in the right way. And unfortunately, those things take time. So a first start for us is always with economic development. Anytime we take on a new project, we go and meet with the folks at economic development, the city manager. We go and talk with all the restaurants in the community, all the retailers. I mean, you'd be amazed at how many voices a hairstylist hears because they are the connection to the community. And really leveraging and leaning into those relationships can tell you so much. In fact, I called a listing agent one time on a piece of property that a restaurant was open and operating. And I said, Stephanie, I have a client that wants this space. And she goes, well, it's not available. The restaurant's open and operating. And I said, well, I know. You probably don't know yet. Your owner probably doesn't know yet, but that restaurant's going to be closing in the next 30 days. And I want it for my client. So I'm going to send you my offer and you just get back to me when they officially let you know. And she goes, well, how do you know this information? And I said, well, I can't, of course, tell you all my secrets, but it's really important for me being in the food and beverage space.
Right.
I go talk with bartenders. I talk to servers. How's business? What's going on? What's new and exciting? Because after they are, done taking care of you and I who are dining there, they're all getting together and they're socializing and they're talking. So they're the best, means of information. And they tell me all the things that I need to in order then to go back and help my client be ahead of the curve in realizing a space is coming available.
I love that story. It reminds me of like Sherlock Holmes has got like the Baker Street irregulars. They're always like telling him like it's all the newspaper guys and all this stuff, like trying to tell him everything. Okay, so let's bring this to specific because we've been talking about sort of high level stuff. But the thing about the hairstylist is like the best thing ever.
Of course.
And you're actually making me, if people can't see me right now, I have zero hair. You're making me want to like go get my hair cut somewhere so I can have this connection to my community, which is really amazing. Maybe a waste of money, but we'll see. I want to ask about specifically your home turf. So I know that at Terra Alma, right, you guys kind of live and breathe Atlanta, the Atlanta region, the sort of communities that are around there. So let's get down to the ground level. Like, how is this shaking out in Atlanta, right? So if you look out the Atlanta market right now, is it headed in this direction? Is it not? What are the sort of forces at play that are sort of determining what you see happening in the Atlanta market?
As you're saying from a Walkable community standpoint or emerging brands?
Sure. Yeah, you could take it there, or you could take it in any direction that you want to go. But kind of what do you see happening there? Because it's very, I will say from my point of view, right, as someone who works with investors every day, Atlanta has been historically not one of the most competitive markets. And over the last few years, it's become extremely competitive, right? So I'm curious from your perspective, what you see happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a significant growth of student housing, of multifamily, of investment, not only for folks already in the Southeast, but outside of the Southeast. I think post-COVID, everyone said, you know what, let's go to where the Sun Belt is. Let's go where the states are open. Let's go, where growth is happening. And so Atlanta, I think even post the Olympics, I think the Olympics really, even in 96, put a huge spotlight on Atlanta. In fact, what made my family move from New Jersey to Atlanta. And post, 98, my father said, okay, Edie, there's 2 months more of fall. There's 2 less of winter. Come join the party.
Right.
And I, being from the Northeast, I had this worldview that everything revolved around New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And I, in retrospect, am so happy to have been pulled here by my family because I feel like there's so much opportunity. Yes, of course, the sun shines about 11 months of the year, but it does get hot in the summer. I think quality of life, cost of living, we're a little bit far to the beach, but the mountains are beautiful, and Chattahoochee River, I think, deserves a little bit more attention than it has been given. But from a development standpoint, I think, the state is overall, as well as the city, very development friendly. And there's a lot of opportunity here, especially in, residential, multifamily, industrial, as we know, across the board has been on fire everywhere. But I do see significant opportunity for more retail, which is my favorite space, because that's really the soul of any developments. I mean, I had the opportunity to look at doing industrial myself, and I said, once you see one warehouse, they all look the same. I want to be like the Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are, right? I want to see them dancing. I want to see them having a good time. I want to be, part of the team that helps cultivate the reason that they're gathering.
Well, that is a perfect segue. You literally could not have lined that up any better. So I appreciate that. It's like you're reading my notes as we're going through it. So I'm a little suspicious whether your network of spies is sort of telling you what I was going to ask about. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about, for someone who seems to really have, like I said before, your finger on the pulse of emerging trends, emerging brands in the restaurant space, in the retail space. What do you see as the things to look out for over the next, let's say, 2, 3, 5 years? Like, what are the emerging trends that you see in those spaces that, let's say, get you excited? You don't have to predict like what's going to make the most money, but what are you most excited about in, let's say, the restaurant space or the retail space?
Absolutely. So I feel like we've had this surge over the years of mega, right? Supermarkets, big bookstores, things getting oversized. And I think that, as we've seen over the last probably 5 years or so, folks are trying to like reset that square footage a little bit. And I love that, because that opens up space for more unique operators.
Right.
So I'd love to see the return of the local bookstore. I'd love to see the return of a corner market where it fills in the holes respectfully, because as much as we love Publix, Kroger, Whole Foods, I mean, they need a certain size box. And if they don't have a certain size box, they're not going to do it. So I think that the trend to be paying attention to, not only for food and beverage, but also for retail, is how can you make things small? Because specifically for restaurants, if you have a 1,500 or 2,000 square foot space, it's so much easier to make it feel busy rather than a 6,000 square foot space that had the same amount of people in it, but it feels empty. And so I think that the smarter move, and the way that it allows restaurants to be more successful faster, is to try to stay small and then fill in where you've got holes in the market. I mean, you might find with one space that you're pulling folks from the Northeast when you thought you were pulling them from the Southwest. And then that allows you to say, okay, we're here, but now that we see we have so many clients up here, we're going to open another one up there. So I think that the new trend, right? Like, small is the new black.
Wow. Oh, small is the new black. I like that. Write that one down. That's amazing. I do think it's interesting that you say that, because I never really thought about it, but there does seem to be more, I don't even want to say small business, but it's more like right size business, right? Where it's not necessarily massive. And I do think there's a real desire for people to feel like the thing, whether that's the bookstore example that you used or, whatever it is, was curated by a person. And maybe it's just because we're so used to being, dictated to by algorithms or by these giant box stores where it's like one size fits all. But the idea of like going to a bookstore and saying, hey, here's what I like, can you recommend something, and getting a really customized recommendation, I think is so powerful and cool. All right. Well, I have to ask you about this. I know we're coming up on time. I don't want to keep you super, super long, but I have to ask you a couple selfish questions. You and I share something, which is that we are both foodies. We both like food a lot. You've already talked about food a lot. You're living my dream life, essentially. You're making me want to get into commercial real estate, which is not a thing I ever thought I would say in my entire life. I want to ask you 2 questions, okay? So the first I'm going to ask them both at the same time. You can answer them in any order, because there might be overlap, maybe not. The first question I'm going to ask you is, what was the best meal you had in the last year? And then the second question is, assume I am coming to Atlanta. I don't think I've ever been to Atlanta. I really want to go. If I'm coming to Atlanta, what's something I need to eat in Atlanta that I'm not going to get somewhere else? So best meal you've had in the last year, and I'm coming to Atlanta. What do I have to eat that sort of speaks to what Atlanta is as a city.
Does the best meal I've had in the last year have to be in Atlanta, or it could be anywhere in the world?
It doesn't. It can be anywhere. It can be anywhere. There can be overlap, but those are separate questions.
Beautiful. Okay, so a must try for any visitors to Atlanta. We've got a restaurant, and I think it's a little bit challenging because you're not here contiguously, but regardless, anytime you go there, it's going to be a phenomenal experience. So there's a restaurant in Midtown called the Consulate. And when I hear the Consulate, I think about, embassy, passport, travel. And I was so blown away the first time I ever walked into this restaurant. And it's undescript, right? It's not on, it's on a good street. It's across the street from a MARTA station, which is our mass transit, but it's tucked away off the street. So at one point in time, it was like just a Big Apple cafe. It was just a lunch spot that served the offices that surrounded it. It was open from 11 to 2. Well,
Right.
This group came in, they completely gutted it. They renovated it. It's called the Consulate because as part of your experience, you feel like you're transported. So every 90 days, a portion of the menu changes. So I have been there now for probably 8 spin parties. So every quarter they spin the globe and you get to travel to a different country. So can't remember exactly what they're on right now, but let's say Venezuela. So part of the menu is Venezuelan. The other side of the menu is the resident. So those are the dishes that were very popular that people liked that stayed on the menu.
Right.
And so even if you can't travel, you get to travel through food with this team. And it's Douglas Hines and Chef Lynn, and they're the most amazing hosts. So if you attend the spin party, you get raffle tickets. And if your raffle ticket is chosen and you're the lucky winner, you get to spin the globe. If you land in the water, the US, or a country that they've been to before, you spin again. And so they have this big map on the room I like to call the library, and there's pins on the wall as to where they've already visited. So what's fascinating to me is that the chef, has 90 days to study this new country, and she is phenomenal and executes every time. And what's so beautiful about it is they did Brazil, I think, one time, and without a doubt, every single, Brazilian was in that restaurant
Right.
to see if she was like executing on the quality and the ingredients and the flavor profile. And I'm continually blown away at how phenomenal she does. So that is a must try. It's called the Consulate. It's in Midtown. And from a design perspective, you walk in and you feel like you've walked into a James Bond scene. I mean, it's like rich, like deep blue and like plush velvet. I mean, I could go on, but phenomenal. Highly recommend. Best meal I've had this year. I think I had the privilege of taking my family on a European trip.
Yeah.
And, you can't go to Europe without going to Italy. And so the first meal that we had, and unfortunately, we did not get dressed up. We're pretty scrappy travelers, and we like to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And we had dinner at a vineyard in Tuscany in Italy. And my boys, I've got 2 boys, 10 and 12, and they said, "Oh man, this olive oil is amazing. Where did it come from?" And the server points outside and says, "Oh, well, my olive groves."
Yeah.
And the bread and the pasta. I mean, it was an expensive meal, but to have the experience of knowing that it came from just outside the walls was just so majestic.
I cannot see. You can see how much I'm smiling. Like I'm just enjoying this story so much. What was traveling with your boys like? My kids are 6 and 8. One of my big goals is for us to take international trips as a family. I really want them to have that experience. What was it like traveling with? Did you guys travel together a lot? Was that a new thing for you guys?
Yep. Our rule is, we're not going to buy you stuff. We're going to get you what you need for school and for sports and whatever it may be, but you're not getting junk. We are very big on travel. We want to make sure that they realize that the world does not revolve around them and that there's so many other things to explore. Yeah. So yeah, it was phenomenal traveling with them. In fact, we took them to Southeast Asia. We have some family there in December of 19. And, I've, had a chance to eat Korean and Malaysian and Thai and, different kinds of food, but I wanted to set the tone. I said, guys, you have to be very respectful. We're just going to eat whatever, is there. And, you don't have to opt in again if you don't like it, but you have to try it all. And they were phenomenal. And quickly I realized that they wanted to turn Buddhist. in Thailand, but there are worse things in the world.
Yeah, of all the things, saying your kids being like, "Hey, I'm joining a blank,"
Right.
that's up there with the most positive, I would say. Well, Edie Weintraub, this has been so much fun. I think you bring such a unique take to what you do. I think your ability to, like I said, just really put your finger on the pulse of what is happening to find these like really powerful local development opportunities. I think it is absolutely amazing. So the website is terraalma.com. So TERRAALMA.com, terraalma.com. Is there anywhere, like, do you do social media? Is there anywhere you want people to look you up or find you online?
Oh, yes, of course. So my Instagram handle is Edie Everywhere. I mean, I feel like that's an easy moniker. It's good alliteration, but it also...
That's such a good one. That's a very good social media handle. Also not something I get to... So again, I mentioned in the beginning, right? It's hard to find a real estate company with a really great name. And you have a really great Instagram handle. And usually the Instagram handles are really boring. So you're like really firing on all cylinders with the naming so far. I really like that. So Edie Everywhere, that's an Instagram?
That's correct.
All right, cool. Amazing. So I'll have links to all of Edie's stuff, obviously, at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. But Edie Everywhere, that's EDIE, Edie Everywhere on Instagram, or go to terraalma.com. Edie Weintraub, thank you so much. This was a real treat for me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me.
That is it. That's it for our interview this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. I took down a bunch of recommendations from Edie, and I hope you did as well. As always, we will have the links and everything that we talked about in the show notes for this episode. You can get those at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. And as always, if you could leave us a review, I really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show, and I read every single one. I will see you next week. I hope you're having a good one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.